So right now, currently, if you look at the rating schedule for the general schedule for mental health, it's pretty much someone just kind of puked up a bunch of symptoms and said 170, 50, 30, 10, 0. And there's a lot of overlapping, especially in the 50 and 70% rating criteria. It's super subjective, and it's just kind of like, boom, there's your symptoms, which is okay, right? Which works. It has been working. Veterans have mental health is one of the top 3 claims. I think it's number 2, actually. It might be number 3 per the VA report of last year. But the new rating schedule basically gets rid of all of that. It's not even comparable to the current one. And there's 5 domains. There's 4 levels. So you have 5 domains, 4 levels, and then the 100, 70, 50, 30, 10, not 0, depends on which level you get per category. So 100%, and I'm doing this off the top of my head, 100% is a level 4 in one domain, which is the highest, or so each rating criteria has an or statement. So it's 1 level 4 or 2 level 3s for 100%. And then it kind of goes down from there. 70 is 1 level 3, 2 level 2s, and then 2 and 1s, and then 1. That's pretty much how the new rating criteria for mental health is. Now, the reason why this matters is because it gets down to this. 1, a ton of veterans are service connected for mental health right now. So we're talking about scenario 1, right? Okay, do I submit the intent to file now? First, is mental health going to come out in June? We don't know. Okay, it's indicated that it might, but we don't know. But regardless, I'm on your team on this, Jason. No matter what, if you are even thinking about increasing mental health, submit the intent to file, right? Because the same criteria applies. The same protections apply. So 1, the VA cannot take your rating on a rating schedule change, period. That will not happen. That's really going to apply for sleep apnea more than any other. But it can't happen. So by submitting the intent to file and then submitting and processing that claim after the effective date, you are now considered on both, which is the puke up symptoms of mental health just kind of scattered, and then the kind of 5 domains, 4 levels, which in my opinion is more objective. And so that's kind of the baseline of where we are at right now with mental health, Jason. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the same scenario. You're rated for mental health. There's a veteran out there rated at 30 or 50 or 70. What is the thought process of saying, hey, am I going to gamble? Because I wanted that to be clear. It is a gamble. Am I going to gamble this rating and submit an increase? What's your advice there for mental health specifically?
Yeah. So again, it's going to be, you need to understand again what the new rating criteria looks like. That's the bottom line. In my opinion, I think it is 1,000 times better than what it used to be. And I also believe it's much, much easier to obtain the 70 if you're at 50, to obtain the 100 if you're currently at 70. In fact, again, my opinion, just reading it, is there's even an argument that you could potentially be at a 50 today, and you might be able to stretch to 100. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying, because of the way, and it's a funny way they do it with you have to have 2 of these. So of the 5 domains, each domain gets its own rating of how severe it is. Then, depending on how severe it is, it helps put you into a different bucket. So you could actually be totally fine in certain aspects of your life. Like, oh yeah, I'm fine there. I do totally fine. But these other 2 really screw me up. And if they're super bad, you're 100%. It's a really great way to formalize that process and make it the same for everybody as far as fairness, I think, is concerned. So I'm actually really super excited about it. But again, I mean, there could be the off chance that you're better off on the current schedule. So you do your own homework on it. One of my favorite parts, Clay, about the change is the elimination of the requirement. Okay, this is important, a requirement to have total social and occupational impairment to reach the 100%. In other words, you cannot hold a steady job, is what the VA is saying. You cannot hold a steady job and be 100% mental health condition rated, right? You just can't. Now, is there somebody out there that does? I'm sure there is, right? I'm sure there is. But the rule is clear. You must be total, which means completely, socially and occupational impaired. So it's eliminating that. So that goes away. So that means that if you meet the criteria in the domains that they talk about, you're going to be able to have 100% and go work $100,000 in a year job, right? And it makes sense because I'm going to be on my soapbox for just a second.
Send it.
It bothered me so much because it's like, look, how can you say that I can't go work a job, right? Maybe before I was more outgoing and I liked people. Now I hate people, but I can still work. I'll go drive a truck across the country and not talk to a single person and be totally fine, right? So I'm going to be penalized because I have to change my world and find something that can look. At the end of the day, we're veterans, we're resourceful, we'll make it happen, and we'll do the best we can to not be homeless, although there are homeless veterans. But we do the best we can with the whatever we've been given, right? So it doesn't change with a mental health rating, right? We still go, I got to figure this out, right? And so you might do a job that you might not necessarily have done prior to. So I'm glad that they got rid of that because I think it was a big barrier for folks that were deserving. Because let's face it, it's there's been a lot of good progression in mental health and understanding it and stigmas and all of that. And it's about time that the VA rating schedule kind of caught up with it because you can be disabled and not look disabled. And you can have to change your whole life around to accommodate your symptoms and all that stuff to make it through. So anyway, I'm just glad that that's going away. I hope it happens soon. I'm in the camp of the sooner that happens, the better. But again, like you said, Clay, ride the fence, throw in the intent to file. You'll ride both sides. Now, if you end up leaning on the other one, they're not going to back pay you before it was effective, right? So if the rating change happens, right, you put in an intent to file today, 6 months later, they change it. And then 6 months after that, you file your claim, right? And let's just pretend it got decided the same day, right? They're not going to back pay you all the way to 6 months prior to the rate change. They're just going to go back to the rate change or the rating schedule change. So just so you're aware, you're not going to be able to have your cake and eat it too with that aspect, but you get the rating schedule aspect to fall into, which is great. So back to you, Clay.
Absolutely. And on that intent to file thing, if you're rated on the new schedule, that's when it would go back to the effective date, right? But if you are rated on the old schedule because your intent to file is prior to, then that's when. So that would be a good indicator. Say, hey, what schedule am I rated off of? Well, what's your effective date? Right. That would answer it. Now to mental health specifically, and this is my opinion, but I'm gonna go out on a limb and say if your decision letter, if you're rated at 50%, on the current schedule, which is the old one, is very, very, it's almost word for 70. It's really weird how mental health is rated right now. And that's not even, I mean, the total social occupational criteria is definitely a part of that, but 50 and 70 are almost the same thing. And so if on your decision letter it says most closely associates with 50%, that's the VA saying, hey, you kind of rate 70%, but not really. We're going to give you 50. That's my Barney style translation. Okay. I think if your decision letter, and there are a ton of veterans rated at 50% for mental health that do meet the current criteria for 70%, if that is you, and I know there's a vast majority of you out there, I think these changes will benefit you the most out of anyone else. Okay. out of anyone else because it's more, like Jason said, it's more methodical. I would use the word objective, right? It is very, I'm not going to say easy, but it's very, it takes the subjectivity out of it. So instead of saying most closely associates with, now it's like, oh, well, you have 2 level 3s, or oh, you have a level 3. Okay, well, that's 70%. Boom. The subjectivity is gone. And so I think that particular group of veterans will benefit the most. Now, for those of you that are, and this applies for all the other rating changes as well, because I'm sure you get the same questions, Jason, but I get a ton of questions from active duty service members asking about the rating schedule change. And I have two little side comments on that. One, good on you for leaning forward and planning, okay? And two, good on you for understanding policy changes while active duty. That's another level of planning, right? That's like, so keep doing it. But for the active duty service members, my one thing to you is, hey, you have zero control over these changes. You don't have the option to submit intent to file. You don't, okay? Unless you're in that BDD claim process and that BDD, benefits delivery at discharge, is submitted prior to these effective dates, it's completely out of your control. And I'm a big fan of, just for your own personal mental state, if you can't control it, forget about it. Let it be, right? Now, when it comes time to submit your claim, figure out the effective dates and say, hey, am I submitting this claim prior to the effective date? Or if it's still proposed. If that answer is yes, then no matter what, you're going to be considered off of the current/old rating schedule. That's it. That's all you need to know. And if it changes, guess what? It changes. You can't control it. Don't worry about it. Okay. I think people, and YouTube is probably a large contributor of this, which is funny because we're on YouTube right now. But I think YouTube kind of exacerbates problems a lot. And Jason and I are definitely a part of that group. I'm not saying we're not. But at the end of the day, these changes we have no control over. What matters is, hey, what are you going to do about it? Right? Are you going to submit the intent to file? Yes or no? Are you going to submit the increase? Yes or no? When you make that decision, what's the decision process like, and why are you making it? That's really the whole point I want to drive for this episode. Jason, do you have anything to add to that before we transition to tinnitus?
I think that the big thing is awareness, right?
Hmm.
And I think that, yes, there's good and bad, right? That come with just, fire hosing information, right? And there's a handful of us out here that are doing it at a bigger level, right? And I think that it's up to you, the individual, to really dig in deeper, but it's about the awareness piece. Really, what I think our mission is, Clay, is to eliminate the "I wish I would have known,"
Yeah.
right? I would, because I cannot tell you how many times I have had conversations with veterans over my last 10 plus 12 years, whatever it's been, in the veterans benefits world, and hear that phrase, "Man, I wish I would have known. Man, I wish I would have knew earlier. Oh, I wish I would have known," right? And so that's really what the key is to bring the awareness, let you dive in, because it is very nuanced, right? Like you said, I mean, nobody's situation's exactly the same, so it's a very nuancy thing, and it's enough information so you could be dangerous out there,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And know how to attack the VA appropriately. So that's really all I had to add for that, Clay.
Awesome. Yeah. And I want to give, on a personal level, I fall into I wish I would have known too. So we're not perfect. We just, from experience and messing it up over and over again, here we are now. Right. And so I missed out on at least 3 years of the clothing allowance simply because I did not know. I was using creams for skin conditions. It was bleaching my sheets, which my wife got really mad at that part. I didn't really care about the sheets, but she does. But my clothes too, right? So I could have gotten the clothing allowance. I'm no longer using those creams because they're a bit irritating, especially over a
Right.
long period of time. But that's
Yeah.
3 years of whatever the clothing allowance is, right? Which
Right.
is that's
Yeah,
non-taxable income.
$1,000 or whatever. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for me, I don't even know why I filed a claim when I got out of the Marine Corps in '97. Right. Don't even remember who told me to do it. Maybe I thought it was part of the out processing process, right? I don't really remember how that happened. I really wasn't even fully aware that there was compensation tied to it, right? It's just I had to go show up to this medical exam at the VA center. I had to drive 2 hours, right? And then I got some paperwork in the mail and said, yeah, we get that you were a mortarman, 81s and all that, but your back condition isn't service connected. And your heartburn, I don't even know why you're filing for that. So in my early 20s, I just threw my hands in the air and went, you know what, screw you, screw all this. I don't care. I got to move on and figure out my life. Then 12 years later, long time frame, 12 years later, I joined the Army National Guard. 3 years into that, I hurt my left eye. That's a big story. And now it's like a snow globe. It's pretty exciting. And so anyway, I'm like, oh man, I got to file a claim. So I dusted everything off and thought, okay, I remember I did that before 15 years ago. And so anyway, I ended up filing a claim. So I had a 15-year gap that I wish I would have known how important this was, because I would have appealed. Well, at that time it was the notice of disagreement and all that stuff. But yeah, I'm on the same page. And I think that's why we're more passionate, right? Passionate
Absolutely.
about, creating the awareness.